The special military operation is over. Peskov admitted that the special operation no longer exists. Instead, it's war. The Russians are leaving the front for Moscow. Is this a new Prigozhin?
Compatriots, we Russian soldiers stand in support of Alexander Lunin and firmly declare that this fire can no longer be extinguished. We demand a direct line between Alexander and Putin, and we demand the truth. Otherwise, we will turn our weapons against those who harm our own soldiers.
Russians are going to China for gasoline. The gasoline crisis is not letting up. Did Nawrocki know how the Poles secretly delivered us missiles for the Patriots, and why are they now threatened with an attack from Russia because of this? You can find out about all this and more in this episode. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov openly admitted a real full-scale war is underway. Imagine, it turns out that everything went off plan because, according to him, Berlin, Paris, The Hague, Oslo, and Washington stood firmly behind Kiev. No one expected it, but the Kremlin leadership has finally decided to call things by their real names. What for years, under threat of prison and long sentences, was forbidden for ordinary Russians to call anything other than a special military operation has suddenly been officially transformed into a war. It's very interesting to imagine the faces of those who are now sitting in Matrosskaya Tishina prison for saying such things. And while Peskov is, as usual, complaining about Western satellites that help the Ukrainian armed forces destroy the occupiers and inventing fake victories about the capture of Kostiantynivka, which is refuted by both the Ukrainian side and independent analysts, within Russia itself, the myth of a great power is beginning to fall apart at the seams. Lately in Russia, topics that were previously taboo are being raised quite often. Take, for example, the case of Lunin. He is a Russian sergeant who promises that the entire front will turn their weapons on the Kremlin. Moreover, while Kremlin officials talk about a steady advance, reality hits the empire's subjects from a completely different angle. Just think about it. In Zabaykallya Krai, a fuel crisis has erupted so severe that Russians are now being offered to refuel their cars in China using yuan. It has reached the point of complete absurdity. Social media is flooded with ads offering to transport cars to China on car carriers solely for the purpose of filling up the tank. The region is on the verge of collapse. Gasoline is rationed, only 15 liters per person, and there are kilometer-long lines at the gas stations. This is the flip side of geopolitical greatness. Meanwhile, on the real, albeit hidden from prying eyes, diplomatic front, no less dramatic events are unfolding. The news had barely died down about how the head of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, decided to revoke the country's highest state award, the Order of the White Eagle, from the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. How did this truly incredible event happen? As it became known from the head of the Bureau of International Policy of the Polish President's Chancellery, Marcin Przydacz, Warsaw likely secretly supplied Ukraine with scarce missiles for the Patriot systems. No one would have believed it, but despite public quarrels, intense hate, and political intrigue, a completely different scenario was unfolding behind closed doors. The conflict erupted not because Donald Tusk's government decided to play secret and hide information from the president. The real bombshell exploded because of a leak into the public sphere and the dirty political context. The transfer to Ukraine of the ultra-modern, scarce, and extremely expensive PAK-3 MSE missiles for the Patriot systems was kept under the strictest secrecy solely for security reasons. But when Deputy Marshal of the same Krzysztof Bosak from the right-wing Confederation Party cynically brought this fact to light, a wave of panic swept over the country. We've been disarmed. Our own air defense was left without missiles. Nawrocki was well aware of every missile that was sent to Kyiv. However, his entourage instantly changed their tune and launched a fierce attack on the Ministry of Defense, which, in response to Bosak's accusations, decided to fully declassify the lists of military aid. Nawrocki's spokesperson, Rafał Leskiewicz, publicly lashed out at Tusk's government, calling the disclosure of this information an act of absolute irresponsibility that plays into the hands of Russian intelligence. The Prime Minister's patience finally snapped. Donald Tusk delivered a tough emotional address directly to President Nawrocki and the radical opposition. His message was unequivocal: come to your senses, don't play with fire. He called for an end to turning national security and Ukraine's survival into a dirty tool for boosting electoral ratings. Moreover, the Poles literally gave up their place in line to American manufacturers, agreeing to wait much longer for their own weapons. And although relations between the countries have been somewhat tense lately due to historical disputes, misunderstandings surrounding the MiG-29 aircraft and drone technologies, Poland remains one of Ukraine's most devoted allies. And against this backdrop, the United States has officially warned Poland Moscow is seriously considering the possibility of an armed provocation in the coming months, simply to test NATO's resolve. Imagine the worst-case scenario that Western intelligence agencies are analyzing. From hybrid drone attacks on power plants to a brazen ground invasion from the territory of Belarus or the Kaliningrad region. The Russians might stage a show pretending that their troops simply got lost due to GPS malfunctions, or that they launched a fake rescue mission for their helicopter, hoping that the alliance, under pressure from the US, will be too afraid to respond with force. However, the main goal of this dirty game remains unchanged: to use blackmail to force the West to stop supporting Ukraine. The continent is on the brink of tension as the stakes in this game have reached their highest point. The outcome of these events demonstrates a clear pattern. The real geopolitical front is radically different from what politicians present to the public. On one hand, inside Russia, the facade of a controlled special operation is beginning to crumble. The Kremlin is forced to officially acknowledge the war and the protracted confrontation with the West against the backdrop of internal systemic failures, starting with the emergence of an armed mutiny within the army. The case of Sergeant Lunin, to the absurd fuel collapse on the empire's periphery, which is forcing Russians to seek salvation in China. On the other hand, the Western world, despite internal disputes, maintains ironclad unity on matters of security. The Polish precedent is the best proof of this. While fierce political and historical battles rage in the public arena, ranging from stripping awards to disputes over electoral ratings, behind closed doors, Warsaw is deliberately taking unprecedented steps, giving Ukraine its own scarce weapons, Patriot missile systems, and yielding its place in the queue for armaments. As a result, Moscow's attempts to intimidate NATO with the threat of new armed provocations in Belarus or the Kaliningrad region have the exact opposite effect. Instead of splitting the allies and forcing them to stop supporting Ukraine, Russian pressure only strengthens the behind-the-scenes military cooperation between Europe and the United States. The stakes have risen to their highest, and the West is demonstrating its readiness to withstand a blow despite any internal political intrigues and tactical disagreements.